I wanted to thank everybody for coming and for Bellen giving me this opportunity. Obviously, this is a little out of my comfort zone, but hey, how do you get better? So also wanted to thank Joel for his presentation. Give him another round of applause, please. All right, so I'm a big quotes guy. One of the quotes that I wanted to start with this morning was by Chris Hogan. It's hard to be hateful when you're grateful. I think that's a great place to start in life. Really taking a look at the things that you have and kind of where you're at. Everybody's on a different journey. And I think that's so important because no two people are going to walk the same path. Just an introduction, a little bit about myself. I was talking to Carla and Angela one day, and one of the things that came to mind is I don't have an MBA. I don't have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's degree. I have an associate's. And where that came from was kind of interesting. Again, not to bore you, but at 17, I was in high school, and my guidance counselor said, hey, it's time to pick a profession in life. And I'm like, I hate school. To be honest, when I was a junior, senior in high school, I was lucky if I could manage a B. Not because I wasn't smart enough, I just didn't care. I didn't have purpose, I couldn't figure it out. So I went home with this book and I said to my mom, hey, time to pick a career. And I said, yeah, so what am I gonna do? And she says, well, do what you want. And I said, great, I'm gonna be a nurse. And she said, no. And I'm like, well, you're a nurse. She was a nurse in orthopedics at Bellen. That's kind of, little kid. I grew up with Bellen. Went to all the staff meetings, and I'm like, hey, it's just a natural thing, right? And she's like, nope. She goes, you're going to have a family someday. There weren't a lot of clinics at that time. And she's like, that's probably not a good idea. So went to my dad. He was an electrician, had some small businesses. And I said to my dad, hey, let me help you run the business. And he's like, nope. I'm like, this is cool, right? Like, you go to your parents for support, and they're like, nope, figure it out. So I took the book home, opened it up, and I found mechanical design. Still to this day, I don't know why I picked it. It had some interest, so I went to school, managed my way, and at 24, I realized that working for other employers, I saw two things. One, their employees weren't being treated the way I thought they should be. And the other one was we weren't managing customers. Any of you know machine shops, manufacturing? I'll speak for our industry, and what I've grown up with is we make commitments we can't keep. We take too much work and we make people angry. So I saw early on that things had to change. So I decided that it was time to start a business. And one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing today is because of all the help that I received along the way, and I think that's the one thing we as employers have the privilege to do is to help people. So along the journey, there were obviously a lot of challenges. I had a partner early in the game, and I ended up, in a short period of time, we ended up separating ways. Some of you may have been in partnerships. They're not easy. I've been through 4 economic downturns. I ask myself a lot, how does a 24-year-old kid start a career, start a business, survive 4 economic downturns? And to back up a bit, another thing that's kind of sobering, especially at my age, was I went to the bank, our local bank, and they said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I need a lot of money. And they said, well, how much? I said, $325,000. And they looked at me and said, okay. I go, I don't have anything, and my parents didn't have a silver spoon. So I'm like, can I apply for the loan? And they're like, sure. So 2 weeks later, the lady calls me back and says, come on in, we need to talk to you. And they said, well, we're going to give you the money. And I said, on my signature? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, what is the deal, right? So it continues. I get the machines to start, and now I need some support equipment. And Dick Jonas, here from Green Bay at Jonas Supply, he comes in one day and says, what are you doing? And I said, starting a business. And he's like, well, do you need some help? And I'm like, of course. And he hands me his catalog. He says, stick out your left hand. So I handed out my left hand. He puts the book in, and he says, anything you need in this book, now give me your right hand. So he gives me his right hand, and he shakes it. And he says, anything you need in this book up to $50,000, pay me when you can on a handshake. So when I look back and just at that part of it, there's obviously a lot of pieces to this, and if it wouldn't have been for the people helping early in the game, the dream would have never come true, right? So I think we all have a lot of these stories of people who have, influenced and impacted our lives. So for me with the business, then it led into having kids. I have 2 daughters, and both of my kids have experienced going through high school some mental issues like low self-esteem, can't do it, constantly like judging themselves. And we got bigger into quotes as time wore on, just started looking at different ways of doing things, and really started to coach them and talk them through the difficulties that they faced. Basically, even looking at people at work, there were times where all of us were like, we didn't believe in what we were doing, we were scared, there were many challenges, and it just became something that was too much in the background. I also coach high school sports, girls basketball. I'm an assistant coach. I help out with some softball and some other programs, and I even work with kids in a wellness center. And you can just see how, a lot of kids are not programmed to be strong enough to do everything. And then they turn into adults, and then it just continues. So I said to myself, you know what, I need to look in the mirror because my skill set is not where it needs to be, and I don't see problems, I see opportunity. So what I did is last spring, I took a look at a leadership course. I'm not versed in this stuff, but I thought, you know what, great opportunity to learn. I don't know if you guys have heard of Dave Ramsey. He's known for his financial work, but he's also an amazing leader. We went to San Diego, Eric Schneider, a guy who works with me, and we basically had our hearts tore out, put on a table, reprogrammed, and put back in. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever been on. If any of you have the opportunity to go to a Entree Leadership Summit, you'll never be the same person. It's a pretty cool experience. And that leadership conference basically taught me more about the mission of things that I need to accomplish in my life. We started with a vision statement. To be honest, again, not having the background, we really never looked at a vision statement, a purpose. When I was at that conference, one of the things that was said, Jesse Itzler stood up, and there was 4,000 people in the room, and he said, "How many of you have a personal mission statement in life?" And I bet you less than 100 people raised their hand. And I was one of them that didn't raise my hand because I didn't even know what he was talking about. So I went back and started to look at vision. I started to look at purpose. I started to look at, why are we doing this? There are many reasons, obviously, to do it. One was, go back to the beginning, take care of people. I can't be a good leader if I don't create vision and I don't give people purpose. So we started, when we came back, I sat down and said, things got to change. And what I was able to do with the help of Dave Ramsey and his team, and just some insight and listening to the people, was to create a individualized program where I sit down and kind of coach them through life. Again, it's not that I'm better than they are, it's just we need to have discussions and try to help people get better. So the first group was my leaders, and I'd like to say they all volunteered, but I probably kind of maybe forced them to volunteer a little bit. But again, they all willingly came along for the ride. Each week, the format was we'd sit down, we put together a new conference table or conference area. The wall is completely filled with quotes. It's more about a place of comfort, a place that people can just be themselves and really share what's on their minds. So we'd start with just general conversation. We'd have an icebreaker. We'd talk about family. We'd talk about the weekend, whatever it may be. And then we'd show a video. These videos are on YouTube. Just research them. We had various different speakers, and they would be kind of a message, something to wake you up. Again, we all do that same route every day. And I asked one of the people in our second group, I asked him to go home and put his clothes on differently one day. I said, just get dressed differently. And he's like, okay. The next day he came in and he hated me. He's like, that is painful and I'm not doing it again. So it was just a reminder to me of how much in a rut we get, and it's the same repetitious thing every day. So with these videos, the idea was to give people just some time to think differently, some time to get some inspiration, and maybe look at, instead of me saying it or a friend saying it or a spouse saying it, they hear it differently. And then we would give them kind of an assignment that they could go home and take some time and work on it and really see some of the qualities that they had to offer, and really kind of focus on themselves. And quickly, we began to find people making statements like, I struggle with self-confidence, and, there are things that scare me. And also, one of the comments that was made was, this is kind of cool because I don't get to work on me. I don't get to work on me ever. I'm always worried about my kids, my job, paying bills. And during the program, each week, it would be something different. And I think we have like 17 or 18 weeks of programming, and now we're to a point with our first group that we don't do the assignments anymore. We just get together and talk about life every 2 weeks. We keep the connection. We support people. There's some days we need boxes of Kleenex. It's just, that's the reality. You have people who are struggling every single day. In our second group, we had another group of volunteers. So we have about 20 people out of 50 that have gone through it voluntarily, or in the first group's case, I forced them to. And the rest of them are just either scared to do it, or they don't necessarily maybe want to get involved at that level. So we're just kind of flying over the top and bringing them together and still creating that culture. And that's the one thing I think I took away from it, is that it's okay, like not everybody has to buy in. But at the end of the day, you are trying to create a culture, and that culture is your responsibility. And then if you have what Dave and his team referred to as, we all have groups of thoroughbreds and we have donkeys. We have people who want to run at a very, very fast pace and are very much driven by their own personal goals. And then we have the donkeys who haven't figured it out. Now, again, that may sound degrading, but it was just a visual representation of the two different populations of people. I think you have to give time, as Joel said, like not everybody's on the same journey at the same time, and you got to respect that, because the harder you push them. Sulin's here. She's the director of our HR department. She's been with me forever. She helped raise my kids when they were young, and she's good at keeping me grounded, like we're doing too much or we're going too fast. And she just recently came with me on Dave's, he had a class in Tennessee where we dissected parts of the business and figured out how leadership plays a huge role. And it was Sue's first experience with kind of the out-of-the-box leadership away from work. So we're doing some really cool things, really proud of it, and it's kind of cool to see people growing individually. I think that's the biggest juice that I get, is looking at people and just seeing them figure out, like, man, I can do this. We've taken it to the high school. We now have a group of high school kids. There's 11 or 12 of them with their instructor that come in, same thing every day, same program. They're in about week number 6. A couple stories I can share. One of the girls in our class, she said, I've been watching my grades on PowerSchool, the online software to check your grades. And she said, I realized a couple of my grades are sliding. And she goes, I'm a procrastinator, and I don't want to retake part of my senior year, so I need to take care of myself and do my job. And I didn't do that, she did it. Another one was just people realizing in that room that it was okay to talk to each other about stuff that was sensitive, because they trusted us after a very short time that we weren't going to publish it and we weren't going to make them feel bad. I also learned a new acronym this past week, which I think is really cool, and I actually added a letter to it. So Chris Hogan was giving a speech about how important it is as leaders that we give the people we represent air. They need air to breathe, they need air to live. And air stands for appreciation, information, inspiration, and recognition. So if you think about those four main components and what we have in leadership, we need to, make sure that we're giving people that resource. And then I just wanted to also let you know that we're going to try one more group. I met with Ann and Troy from Bellin yesterday, and we're going to try some of the same principles with some of the Bellin staff and leadership, just to see if I can learn something for my own team, and also if we can teach and help Bellin's community get stronger. I'm going to leave you with one thing on the timeline of life. I don't know if, it's not up there, that's okay. So when you think of a tree, we just went through fall, and there's a lot of leaves on the trees, and they're falling to the ground, and pretty soon the trees have no leaves. I think that's a good representation of what life really is. I mean, if you slow it down enough and think about it, all the leaves on your tree are basically the stories of life that, you've gone through, you've struggled through, and you've dealt with. And they kind of fall to the ground, and a lot of us that have anxiety and stress, we worry about those leaves on the ground, that we can't change those stories. All we can do is go forward. So put a lot of good nutrients into what you do, learn as much as you can, and don't be afraid to ask for help. So appreciate everybody and the team that we have, and how much our group is decided to get better. That's the other thing, is I think it's important to realize that everything is a decision, and you're ultimately in charge of where you're headed. So thanks again for today. I appreciate it. Have a good day.